Hello and welcome to another episode of the Gentleman's Brotherhood. I'm Juan Sepulveda and thank you for taking the time to join us in this conversation tonight. Tonight, my guest host is my good friend, Tamesh Bahadur. Tamesh, how are you today?
Doing well. And yourself?
I'm doing quite well. Your hair is looking very nice, I might add.
Thank you.
Good response. And there's the setup for tonight's conversation. We're going to be talking about accepting a compliment or how to deal with compliment. This might sound simple, but for a lot of people, it tends to be something difficult or challenging, perhaps. So tonight we're going to have a little conversation just to see where we are today in respect to accepting compliments, giving compliments. How do we deal with them today? And perhaps how we've dealt with them in the past and what we've learned in the process. So hopefully you can find this informative and you can find it useful, especially if you are having a lot of business interactions. Perhaps you're getting to meet new people whenever you go to a new place or whenever you do something that is of notice and receive compliments as a result. How do you properly or how do you gracefully deal with a compliment? So, Tamesh, I want to hear from you initially. How do you deal with compliments today in comparison to maybe years ago when you were growing up?
I actually handle compliments a lot better now than I did growing up. Growing up, I was in a culture where you're not really given compliments. So to a degree, you're not taught how to accept compliments either. And so whenever I was given a compliment, my response would either just be a very bashful nodding of the head with a slight smile, or just saying, no, that's not necessary. But as I've gotten older and wiser, I've noticed that when people give compliments, there are times that it is disingenuous. But for the most part, people are sincere. And the correct thing to do would be to give an acknowledgement and say thank you at the least. And that's where I am now. It's gone from a point of, no, you shouldn't have, to, why, thank you, I appreciate that.
That's very good to hear, because it doesn't have to be awkward. It doesn't have to be very complicated. Obviously, when someone takes the time to actually attempt to pay you a compliment, most of the time they'll notice something from you, either visually or something that you've done or something that you've created, and they acknowledge the value in it and they want to express it. That's not easy for everybody to do. So whenever that actually happens, it's a present. It's a gift that someone is giving you. They're taking the time to say, hey, listen, I admire what you're doing, or I admire how you look. You should know that. So handling it with that kind of respect or that kind of grace, I think it's important. I'm in a very similar position. I feel that today I am much better at accepting a compliment than I was, especially when I started, working professionally as an artist. I've had the fortune of developing my skill to a degree that it elicits a positive response from people. So I spend a lot of time doing exhibitions and gallery shows and that sort of thing. And it is very common for someone to see something you've created in a gallery and for them to express themselves about it and tell you, oh my God, I really like that piece, or, oh, this is interesting. What were you thinking? That sort of thing. So initially it could be awkward at times to hear a person saying something and not knowing exactly what to say. But today, at the very least, I'll say, "Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate it," or "Thank you for the compliment," or "Thank you for the kind words." Is an expression that I use rather frequently. And I there's a reason behind why I say that, especially in written form. When people take the time to write something, a note of appreciation or something, I want to acknowledge that I really value them taking the time to use kind words in their communication, for them to actually take the time to say, something pleasant. So I think you and I are in a similar position when it comes to being better at it now than we were in the past. Do you pay compliments to people on a regular basis or frequently? What would you say?
Absolutely, absolutely. I find that there's two things I've observed that people respond to very well on a daily basis. One is a greeting and a wishing of a good day, and the other is acknowledgement via a compliment to any victory whatsoever. It could be something small as they gave you something on time, or something large where they completed a project. But having that acknowledgement received from someone else, it goes a long way on a daily basis.
Yeah, and you allude to the fact that you work with a lot of people. You're in the tech industry, and you're also an entrepreneur. So you have a lot of um, interactions with people that are contributing to the whole, either to the company or to your business, and taking the time to actually tell them, "Oh, I really like what you did here," or "Thank you for getting back to me so quickly." Like those are compliments that perhaps might not have been at the forefront of the listener's mind when they first heard the title, but that's a very, very important compliment. You're in a sense, you are letting these people know that their efforts did not go unnoticed, and
Absolutely.
there's great value in that. Especially if you're a boss and you want people um, to continue performing in a positive manner, acknowledging whenever they have those victories, like you mentioned. I think it's very important. Now, we compile a list of do's and don'ts of how to handle compliments, and I want us to go through those here shortly, because I think that for the people listening, and even for us to refresh our minds as to how to handle compliments, having a list of alternatives or things to keep in mind, I think it could be a very useful tool. So I wanted to start. Let's start negative. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Um, if you want to tackle the first one, please.
Sure. So the first don't is don't be conceited, be graceful. And that plays a huge part because there's a very fine line between showing appreciation and expressing a bit of snarkiness. And a good example of that is if someone were to say, "You did a great job completing that project ahead of schedule." The response should be "Thank you." It should not be "I know" or "I did, didn't I?"
that that was what takes me back to that movie Office Space. I can see some of those characters responding like that.
And it invokes a sense of discomfort on both parties. While initially it may seem right to the recipient, the person delivering the appreciation, they're going to take it as usually a sign of some type of cockiness
Hmm.
and lack of appreciation for receiving that compliment. And once that's expressed, it could lead for a little bit of an awkward confrontation with no clear exit from that situation.
Hmm. Or even if there's no confrontation, just the awkwardness of it, and
Right.
uh, perhaps the trepidation to in the future uh, try to compliment them in a similar manner, because that's one thing we don't want to do. We don't want to discourage the positive behavior. We want to make sure that whenever it happens, we we support it, and we encourage it to happen again as often as possible. So that's a good don't be conceited, be graceful. um it could be super annoying as well if you tell someone, it's like, yeah, I know, oh, that looks good on you, I know. All right, the second don't when dealing with a compliment is don't reject the compliment. Many times I've seen this happen a lot, um, and is one of the techniques I used to use to what I thought was being humble. Whenever someone would say, "Oh my God, you're so talented," and I would reject it, I would say, "Oh no, 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 it's you don't mean that," or something like that. And there's nothing gained whenever you reject a compliment. Here, the person is pretty much giving you a gift. They're taking that moment to acknowledge the value of what they see, and to simply reject it would be the metaphorical equivalent of someone trying to give you a wrap present and you knocking it out of their hands, or just setting it aside and not acknowledging it even. So rejecting a compliment is not the solution to try to diffuse the nervousness, or to diffuse perhaps that awkwardness that some people may feel when receiving a compliment. Like, we don't deny the fact that for some people receiving a compliment is uncomfortable. It just simply, it simply is. And there are things that you can do in your mindset. There are different adjustments that you can do in order for you to be more comfortable receiving a compliment, and we're going to touch up on those in a minute. So the next don't for
Sure. So don't downplay a compliment. If someone were to give you a compliment, and I'll use the example again of on the job, if they say great work, don't say I was just doing my job, or it's what I do. You're downplaying the significance of what they're relaying to you, and you're diminishing your own value as well. And that's communicated instantaneously. I came across that recently with myself, dealing with someone in management where they paid a compliment, and instinctively I was going to say I was just doing my job. But if I was just doing my job, then the acknowledgement would not have been there. And it's something that fortunately I was able to figure out at the right moment and not vocalize. Instead, I just said very calmly, "Thank you. I'm humbled by your appreciation."
That's very good. That's a very good response. And I appreciate the fact that you're not denying that your instinctual response, like your gut, or from the gut, it was, no, I'm just doing my job. Like, it's not a big deal. But you catch yourself. And this is what I hope some of these tools can do, is that they can actually put in your mind that idea that here I have some options, and you might have a go-to response to a compliment, but ideally this particular list can help you also have a variety. So the next one is, don't one up the compliment. And I'm sure this happens a lot when someone pays you a compliment on your looks. So someone comes to you and says, "Oh my God, I love how that jacket, looks on you." And some people, instead of accepting the compliment and being grateful for it, they just turn around and say, like, "Oh, but look at yourself. Look at this thing." And it sometimes is almost like a desperate move to try to find something that you can compliment on. And that's kind of like risky, because you're improvising, on something. If you genuinely mean it, if you genuinely mean that the other person, looks great, that's fine if you do it after accepting the compliment. "Oh, thank you for noticing. Oh, I appreciate it. I really like this jacket." That's a not normal response. Um, and you can follow that up by saying, "I really like how yours looks as well." Or, I did notice your shoes earlier, or, the colorful shoelaces. Because, like, that's one thing that I pay attention to. Sometimes you see a shoe that it's a very subdued shoe like any other, and then they have just a hint of color in the eyes of the shoelace, or the shoelace themselves have some sort of small detail. But if you noticed it, you want to point it out afterwards, that's fine. You're pretty much commiserating the gesture. But just using the one up technique as a diffusing strategy, it's I would say it's discouraged, because it doesn't give you an opportunity to really embrace the compliment, appreciate it, accept it gracefully. It's just a matter of just doing like in the cartoons where they have that U-shaped tube. You know what I'm saying? I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna put an illustration on that later. So what's the next one?
So the next one is don't make the individual feel inadequate or discouraged. And that actually, I feel, goes hand in hand with don't one up the compliment, because it can very easily go down a slippery slope. And a perfect example is if you have a personality type where you have a dry sense of humor and someone pays you a compliment and you try to return a compliment, usually from my experience, I've seen that dry sense of humor kick in, and instead of something positive being said, something is said in a passive aggressive manner to make yourself feel a little better about that appreciation you just received. So they may say, "That's a great looking jacket," and you say, "Why, thank you," and yours looks okay as well.
Hmm.
Basic example, but something like that could definitely discourage someone from wanting to discuss things with you further or show further appreciation for anything they might observe on you or you doing.
That's a good example. I also thought when we were coming up with these, I thought of that also as if you question the motive, for example,
Hmm.
and someone says, "Oh my God, I loved how you said that," and let's say you're a boss, for example, you're a supervisor, and you're like, "You're just trying to get into my good graces." You see, you assign an ulterior motive to the compliment. You may be discouraging that person from paying you a compliment in the future, or even worse, paying the compliment to someone else. So it's almost a contagious effect. You had a negative, um, there was a negative reaction to the compliment triggered by you. Then that other person might be discouraged to pay a compliment to somebody else because of how it made them feel. So we have to be very careful not to, in the effort of maybe deflecting a compliment, to actually discourage an individual from being kind with their words and gestures to someone else. So those are our 5 don'ts on accepting a compliment or dealing with a compliment. So let's move on to, what's encouraged. Like what should you do? Like what are some of the options that you should consider whenever someone pays you a compliment? And I'll take the first one. Take the time to understand the compliment. Sometimes our reaction might be so fast that we're just stopping the compliment and not really paying attention to what the person is really saying. Taking the time to understand the compliment gives you, and I'm not saying, say nothing for a minute, just take a second or two. Let's say they point to your shoes. Take a moment to look at your shoes or your tie. That's a very common one for me. I like to wear some flashy uh, ties, or what do you call it? Tie bars, or lapel pins that may draw someone's attention. So the compliment is paid. Take that 1 second to actually acknowledge it. Look at it. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that's a very smooth way to actually receive the compliment, and give your brain a little second or two to actually come up with a polite response in return.
So the next one is to be grateful and say thank you. And what comes to mind for that is I have flashbacks to a family outing where an adult sees a child wearing a nice outfit and they say, "Oh, don't you look so nice today?" And the child stands there looking at them, and then the parent gives them a little nudge and says, "What do we say? Thank you." So from an early age, we're taught that at the very least, when someone pays you a compliment, to just smile and say thank you.
Yeah.
And that smile goes a long way with the thank you. Reason being, I believe, is that the warmth that it conveys is a perfect reciprocation to that compliment.
No, that's a very good point. And, thank you. It's such a simple expression. You don't have to adorn it with too many words before or after. Thank you. And that's enough. And that's a proper response to a compliment. But when you accompany that, of course, with a smile, the how the your authenticity comes out. You're being genuine in your response, and really be grateful for it. Like, this person is acknowledging something positive in you. Take it, right? The next one is be accepting, acknowledging. And here I'm going to revert to the example also of my paintings and my art, because without necessarily being conceited or self-aggrandizing, there is a aesthetic value to the kind of work that I do. So some people are going to like what they see, because I tend to paint surrealism. There's a good number of people that look at it and they tilt their head like a dog that hears a whistle, like, what is this? But quite often someone would say, oh my God, I love that. Well, that's clever. And me taking a moment to acknowledge what they really mean. And these people are really seeing something in me that they appreciate it, and they're taking the time to offer it up to me. I have to acknowledge that there's value in that there's a connection there with someone that I might never have seen before in my life. And here they take the time to use some kind words in regards to my work. So that can be fulfilling if you accept it and acknowledge it. If your mindset is one of rejecting the compliment, perhaps you're cheating yourself out of being reminded of how talented you are writing, or how beautifully you paint, or how nicely you dressed. Like, those are some examples. So you might be cheating yourself out of receiving something of value if you don't acknowledge or don't accept the compliment.
Absolutely. I've noticed that with the example of being talented as well, in day-to-day occurrences, you can take that and you can have a little fun with it as well. That goes part of knowing your audience. For example,
Yes.
in the world of IT, let's say from a support standpoint, if you deal with a certain set of users on a regular basis, you develop a certain rapport with them, and they may say, you guys are doing an awesome job. And you can jokingly say, we do, don't we? But then there's a little bit of jovial laughter followed by, still though, thank you, we appreciate you acknowledging that. So acceptance definitely plays a big factor in receiving a compliment.
Absolutely. And if you want to take the next one,
so the next do is to be humble. Don't take a situation where you're receiving a compliment and use it as a springboard to sing the rest of your good deeds. Accept it for what it is. It's a singular moment in time where someone is taking a moment of their time to acknowledge something that you've done, and be appreciative and humble by that. Don't say, well, it's because I was able to do this, this, and this also. Or, well, my team was behind it, but without my leadership, it wouldn't have gotten done.
oh wow, that's such a good example.
Be humble, say thank you. It was a concerted effort, and we'll continue doing that great work.
That's such a great example, and especially because that is the example response that you mentioned is one that sometimes goes by on a you do it unaware. You're not aware that you're that you're doing it. So if you're present of mind whenever something like that happens, and ideally you can catch yourself trying to continue like stoking your own brilliance, try to catch those moments, because they're referring to this instant of brilliance, not how universally awesome you are. And you might be, you might be incredible, and that's wonderful, but it it can make a situation awkward if if you take that as a door opening to you continue to pat yourself in the back. Now the last one we have here on the do's is be mindful of your body language. Like, there are different things that we do with our body that may send a signal to someone. Let's say, for example, going back to the example of a suit jacket. Someone says, "Oh, I like your suit jacket." Closing yourself off when someone does that, like crossing your arms tightly and say, "Oh, no, this this is just a cheapo thing." It exacerbates the situation. So like usually you'll have a body language in combination with an expression. Or you might say, "Oh, thank you," and then like close up or turn around. That might show the person, "Oh, you're becoming uncomfortable by this." So by consequence, they will be discouraged from paying you a compliment in the future. Body language also includes your facial expressions. If your facial expression says, "Oh my God, here you go again," or if your expression says something like, "Seriously?" Right? Like you may have that stare from someone that say, "Oh my God, I like your tie," and you're like, "Really?" That's not a very welcoming or graceful way to handle it. Of course, like we're saying these things and we're talking about mostly a formal situation or a business situation. If you're fooling around with your friends, perhaps your response may be different. But one thing to keep in mind is that you want to have an arsenal in your life of alternatives. You have this collection of things that you can do in a proper setting. And if any time someone pays you a compliment, you're always going to joke about it, or you're always going to reject it, or you're always going to deflect it, minimize it, one up, then what you might be doing is you're building a habit of dealing with compliments in that manner. So we encourage you to look through these. We're going to add the text of these in the show notes so that you can peruse them if you want in the future. And also we encourage you to listen through these again and share these with someone. If you know anybody who perhaps has difficulty with dealing with compliments, you may, in a very graceful way, if you're close enough to this person, suggest that they listen to this, because they might find it very helpful, and it could be freeing for them to have an alternative response to a proper compliment. So as we wrap up, Tamesh, if you could talk to the 17-year-old Tamesh as he left high school and joined the college world or the work or the corporate world, what would you say to him in regards to dealing with compliments? What would be your number one advice to him?
My number one advice would be, what do you have to lose by saying thank you? A little bit of a rhetorical question, but I feel it's very profound. There's no harm in saying thank you and acknowledging that someone is showing you appreciation, because the least that'll happen is that they'll feel better about themselves for saying something nice. The best that will happen, you'll feel better that someone acknowledged something that you've done or are doing. So don't be afraid to say thank you.
Excellent. I'll answer the same question for myself. If I were to be able to tell a younger version of me some advice when it comes to dealing with compliments, I would say recognize the compliment for what it really is. Try to ascertain what they really are telling you, and be accepting of it. And this mainly because of how long it took me to really deal better with compliments. So I would say that. I would say, really pay attention to what they're trying to tell you, that they value. There's something about you that they value. Honor that. And don't dishonor it by just turning your back on it or deflecting it. So that would be my advice. Now, we hope that you found these do's and don'ts useful, and we would love to hear your experience with compliments. Please take a moment and in the comment sections of our YouTube channel or if you're in the podcast, leave us a review and let us know what has been your experience with compliments. Are you very comfortable dealing with them? Are you still uncomfortable with them? Is there any of these tips that we've given you that you want to try, that you're willing to try? And if you actually put any of these to practice and you get a good result from them, we would love to hear that. So if you go to our website, you go to thegentleman'sbrotherhood.com, and you can go to the comments section and let us know how things are going for you, because we would love to hear your experience. So Tamesh, I really appreciate your generosity with your time. You've been a good guest host.
Thank you. I'm humbled for you having me here tonight.
Excellent response. Loved it. All right. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. And until next time, I wish you courage and courtesy.